Good morning, everybody. I'm impressed that you're out. 7:30, brisk. Hopefully last bit of winter that we've got coming. You never can really tell in this part of the country. I have two kids right now in San Diego. One's going to be a professor at University of Arkansas shortly in economics, and I remind them all the time that we have the same average temperature in Kansas that they do in San Diego. And this is true. We have the same average temperature in Topeka, Kansas as in San Diego. My son reminds me they hit the mean more than we do. So we so still, look, we're at the same average. The nice thing about us in Kansas is we can get all 4 seasons and sometimes in 1 week. So it just, it moves back and forth, particularly this time of year. Delighted to be with you. Very kind of you to be out this morning. I'm going to run through some PowerPoints to give you the points of what we've done in the state of Kansas. You make your own judgments and then open up for comments and questions that you might have at the end. I'm not saying this is the way for people to go. It is a way to move forward, and I think once you see some of the PowerPoints, you'll see why we took the actions that we did to try to get the economy growing in the state of Kansas over a period of time. I love my state. I'm 4th generation farm kid. Brownbacks were all farmers moving across, German farmers that moved out of Pennsylvania into Kansas, and now in my home county of Lynn County, which is right across from Butler, Missouri, and in that area I grew up in Kansas City Media Market. They say brownbacks are thick as flies and just as bad. So we got a big farm family, bunch of people there in the area, and we're all farmers. And the nice thing about the Germans were they very sensible type of people, and they also had a good investment philosophy. There's an old German saying that they say in the farm communities that many a barn is built a house, but never a house a barn. Have some of you heard this one? Nobody knows this one? I got surprised, but I thought, what a great thought. Just because, you got to invest, you got to build before you can consume. And we in our society today we're backward on that. Say, no, I want to consume now, and then we'll think about investment and building later on. Well, that's very short-sighted, and it doesn't produce a long-term result. And so then you got pumping money supply up instead of trying to build your human capital up, pumping things up that are more artificial instead of really dealing with what you need to deal with. All right, let me go to these slides. And all right, this is the chart. I'm trying to break this trend line. This is the big one we're after. All right, this is Kansas's rank as a percent of the U.S. population. When Bob Dole was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from the old 6th congressional district in northwest Kansas, we were the 28th most populous state in America. We're now 33rd. We're headed to 35th if the trend line doesn't change. We had 6 congressional districts. We're down to 4. We're headed to 3 if we don't break this line. Half. Bob Dole's still traveling the state. He may run again. He is an active guy out, and so you could do in one guy's professional career half cut in your representative power in Washington. This is a terrible trend line. And we'd had prior governors elected, and nobody would even pay attention to this stuff. And it was just kind of like they were saying, look, let's not pay attention to that. We'll just manage the decline and make it easier. That's all we want to do. And yet I don't know of a CEO or a coach that's hired that you hire him to just say, well, just manage the decline easier. You just don't make it feel too bad, okay? That's all we're after here. Do you hire anybody to do that? I'm presuming no, or you're asleep. One of the two. It's not a Baptist church here, is it, I guess? Well, all right, this is the situation we found ourselves in, too. All these dots were counties in the state of Kansas that had double-digit population loss during one decade, the prior decade. So they were losing population over 1% per year annual population loss. And we had 50 counties, which is roughly half of the state, was near that. These are 28 that were actually over that. So this is just people leaving, all right? This is what that chart is now. So the same one that's 28 is down to 4 now. And we've got even some that are having population growth in those areas that we're losing double-digit population loss. Now we've had a nice decade, we've had a nice change on agriculture, we've had some oil and gas drilling, and then we've also done what we call rural opportunity zones, where we say if you move into one of these population declining counties, we got about 50 of them, If you move into there from out of state, no income taxes for 5 years, and we'll help you pay off up to $15,000 of your student loan. And that's drawn in. About a third of the people coming in on that are coming in for the, from out of state. That student loan piece, this is a good deal to do because there's so much student debt accumulating. You put out helping to pay off up to $15,000 student loan, you start to get people's interest. It's hard to get people to move to a lot of rural open spaces. I love it, but my wife's a harder sell on it, and so you got to put something out there. Anyway, all right, so here's what we did on taxes. We'd been a high income tax state in the region. We were highest in the region, okay? So when I started in office, we were 6.45% income tax rates. We've got in statute to get it to 3.9. We're at 4.8 now. That's on your top rate. We've got a two-rate system. 3.5 on the bottom rate, down to 2.3 by 2018. And then I think this is the real secret sauce piece of it. We went small business, so this is LLC pass-through income, sole proprietorship income, subchapter S pass-through income went to 0 year 1 on small business pass-through income. So, and the reason we did this is all our computer modeling showed if you want to grow jobs, which is what I'm after, because if I get jobs, I can get people. You drop your taxes on small business. That's who creates most of the jobs. And it's scored at about $160 million cost to the state. Now, you shouldn't use cost. That's Kansans keeping $160 million of their own money. It's scoring now at about a $204 million, so it's higher than what we thought, not exorbitantly, but it's in the zone. And the other thing I just would ask you real quick, if you're trying to grow an economy, would you give $1 to a small business person, or would you give it to the government? If your objective is to grow an economy,
give it to business.
I would not only just give it, I give it to small business. We do a lot of big business stuff, and I nothing against big business. We're recruiting them all the time. But the guys that really are working and will stick with you are the small business guy. I got a little example of this. My middle daughter got married a year ago. We're laying a floor to put a tent up. Guy's delivering lumber from Menards. He's a contractor with Menards. He's got his own truck there. He's dropping the lumber. He's got 5 more stops that day. Small businessman, and he's doing it himself. He's dumping it, and he's running. He looks at it, he said, hey, you're the governor, aren't you? And I go, yes, I am. He said, hey, thanks for that small business thing you did on the taxes. That's really helped me out. I own this truck. I deliver for Menards, and it's really, really helped me out. I said, oh, good, good. What are you going to do with the money? He said, well, I'm looking at this fall buying another truck and hiring another guy. And I said, great. That's the right answer. That's a perfect answer. That's it. But also look at what it takes a little time. He's got to get the money. He's got to know he's going to keep the money. He's got to have the business to be able to do this, and then he will. So these things do take some time to get back into the economy, and so you experience a near-term fall-off in state revenues before you get your churn going on the other side. All right, now I get written up endlessly about the budget shortfall in Kansas, and you've created a huge budget shortfall. Now, 2 points to this. Number one, it was a bigger shortfall the year I came into office. They actually deficit spent the prior year, and we were looking at a much larger shortfall. And what we're looking at now is we had revenues below projection of about $200 million. We still get school court-ordered financing by the courts on K-12. You guys have experienced that. We still get it. We've had it for 4 decades. The court ordered more money to go into K-12. $130 million is what the legislature appropriated. Some of it's an entitlement system, and it grew to nearly $230 million more in K-12 spending this past year than we budgeted, so that's this. And then our Medicaid caseload has gone up substantially, so we've had a big demand increase on spend, and we had a revenue shortfall of about $205 million. We will balance our budget. It's in our Constitution. You have to every year. We're going to get it done. We're going to continue the move from income taxes to consumption taxes. That's what we're moving to. Leaving property taxes alone, that's mostly local, and then what I want to do is over time I want to move us on to consumption taxes to address these issues. And also, I'll show this, you've got to hold your spend rate down. So this is too busy for you, and you're out of the Kansas City media market. Kansas City media market covers this all the time because they don't like what I'm doing. But here's state spending on K-12, and we spend about $13,000 per student. We spend more than Missouri does per student on K-12. Here is the amount we increased it over last year. We increased it up, like I say, nearly $200 million. I had to allot 1.5%, and this is how much was cut then this past, about 2 months ago, because we didn't have the revenue flows that we needed to. And it was 1.5% cut, and you still had more, substantially more this year than last year going into K-12. The reason I cover that is there's been so much yelling about you cut K-12. We increased it $177 million over last year, and I cut it from the 200-some million back to the 177. You still got a ton more money, but it's a cut, so whatever. Here's what we've tried to do on state general fund expenditure. If I back this chart up to you, you could see just a steady angle going up of spend. What we tried to do is hold our total spend flat. Got 3 big budget areas that are the key drivers: K-12, pensions, Medicaid. Those are your big 3 cost drivers in the system. And the one of them that will eat you is pensions. I've been telling people. We were second least funded pension system in America next to Illinois. Thankfully they were there. We'd been the least funded pension system in America. 56% funded pension system. They put you in jail for doing that. So here's our growth rate of the state general fund spending. So I'm putting money in K-12, I'm putting money in pensions because we've got to build that one up. I'm putting money in Medicaid because of the nature and the cost, and you have to do that. We put everybody in Medicaid's in a managed care system. The whole thing's in managed care. We've gotten our spend growth down to 1.4. I'm trying to hold it below 2% of our spend growth in the state of Kansas. Because one of the keys on going forward is hold your spend down. I mean, it's revenue, expenditures. Here's prior governors, and you can see their growth of state spending and what we've been able to hold it down to with increasing those 3 big cost drivers. So we've had to cut a whole lot of other areas, a lot of consolidations, a lot of reduction of state employees in the other areas. This percent change in private sector employment, this is us, Kansas in the middle. This is the decade 2000-2010. This is the first 3 years of this decade of what we've had of private sector job growth. A lot of people criticize me and they say, well, your growth numbers haven't been good. But they include public sector. We're trying to hold down and reduce our public sector job growth and increase our private sector job growth. So that hits some of our numbers, and so we always emphasize, oh wait, what's private sector job growth? That's what we're after, and this is what we've been able to accomplish. This is Illinois and that's Missouri in that same period of time. Those numbers bounce from back and forth month to month, but these are your totals. Kansas unemployment rate's gone to 4.2%. We're close to full employment at 4.2%. We need people. Really, that's what we need, is we need people. Our statewide employment numbers are record numbers. We're working hard to get people off of public assistance and into work. So now on our TANF dollars that we do in welfare, we require, if you're able-bodied, that you have to apply for a job or take job training. If you're able-bodied, TANF dollars, you have to do one of these 2. That's reduced our TANF rolls 60%. It's just, we will give it to you, but you got to apply for work or you got to take job training. And plus, we need people. So we need people out of the public assistance sector and into the workforce. Here's our job growth numbers. We're 63,000. Private sector job growth since I've been in office. We want to do 100,000 new private sector jobs in this 4-year period that I'm elected. We did just over 50, about 58,000 the first 4 years. We want to do 100,000 new private sector jobs this decade. Here's our decline in public sector jobs. So we've got a trend line going down, about 5,400 decrease of public sector employees since I've taken office. Again, you're trying to hold your spend down on this. And I would like to increase the pay of public sector employees. I'd like to have fewer people and pay them better. And we're doing a lot to also get people out of the classified system and into an unclassified system so you can move folks around. And this last year, the legislature eliminated tenure for K-12 teachers as a statewide mandate. Now that was a big political brawl. It is good reform. The public supports that reform. So the teachers all campaigned against me this last time, but they didn't campaign against me about tenure because the public supports eliminating teacher tenure. They campaigned against me that I'd cut education, which is a lie. I didn't. Doesn't matter in politics. This is kind of what goes on. This is new business for me, and this is one we're really watching and very happy about. We're getting record number of new business filings. These are LLCs and sub-S's filed in the state of Kansas. Nationwide, these numbers are going down. We're losing small businesses nationwide. This is a very bad trend line for us nationwide. I was telling Rex and some others last night, I think this LLC going to zero is such a powerful medicine. I think federally they ought to knock that tax rate in half on LLC pass-through income. Because you would see then these numbers nationwide going up heavily. It'd be nice growth. Here's our here's some of the results. This is small business income growth. This is the national average of small business income growth, been 4.5%. That's first quarter 2000, and since first quarter 2013. Kansas is there, fourth from the top. Not a normal place for us to be in, but this is small business income growth. Hourly wage growth. This is a piece I really like because this is the Federal Reserve's target zone for hourly wage growth. You can see in the blue is the Kansas, yellow is the U.S. You can see the U.S. is still below, but we're hitting even above that wage growth zone. So you're getting nice wage growth, which as a conservative, this is something I really want to see. And as a guy raised on the farm, used to being around people who work a lot, I want to see them getting paid more. That didn't happen if there didn't growth happen and there isn't competition for the labor. And I don't like to see it happen through minimum wage increases, where you just require, okay, everybody's going to make more around here. I want to see it happen in the marketplace and it's sustainable there. And this is what we're seeing, which is great. That's what happens when you get towards full employment. This, and I think it is a pretty dramatic chart, actually. This is KCK, Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City is a fascinating economic zone. You got a city virtually equally divided between two states. You drive across state line, most people have been out of state. Am I in Missouri, am I in Kansas? I don't remember. You got good barbecue, but where is it? That's what I'm looking for. So 55% of the workforce on the Missouri side, 45% on the Kansas side. January 2011, the wage differential is 40 cents an hour in favor of the Kansas side. Now it's $2.93 an hour in favor of the Kansas side. So that's when you get job growth, you get labor competition, you get towards full employment, what do? I got to bid up the price. I got to bid it up to get people. And we're getting a real nice wage growth differential there in the area. I track it. We track this on a monthly basis. Who's creating more jobs? And these are the 5 counties on the Kansas side of Kansas City. The 4 or 5 counties, I don't remember how many on the Missouri side. So it's the metro area. And then during the time period that I've been governor, we beat the Missouri side 72% of the time. Space Parkinson 65, 66. Governor Finney 50%. So you're just tracking it during administrations to see. So there'll be months that Missouri side wins, more months that we're winning, and the numbers growing. So it produces then this chart. This is Kansas City, Missouri, private sector job growth. Kansas City, Kansas, and these are the counties. This is the whole region. Kansas side job growth. They've been growing in that period of time. This period has been marked 1% rate of growth. We've been at 1.8, and you can see those lines moving. It's been more dramatic even in the past. Missouri has picked up its growth rate, and we need people. That's what we're doing, and the whole objective of it is to get that first chart to change so that we're not 35th most populous state in America, that we start moving back the other way on it. Some people are critical of it, don't like it, don't think it's the way to go. I think the clear pro-growth position in America is to be a right-to-work state with no income taxes. I think that's if you want to get on people's radar about growth, serious about growth, those are the things that people are looking at. We're trying to do in Kansas something hadn't done since Alaska. Did it in the 70s and found big oil, and that is get off of the income tax. Most places never went to it, that stayed off. There are 9 states without an income tax. And most of them just never, they're blessed that people didn't make the wrong decisions years ago. So to reverse it is hard, but that's what we're moving towards, and we want to get this done, and we're going to stick to it. Let me open for comments, questions, however you guys want to handle that.
Yeah, let's...
Pretty tough. We're in Lent season now, and so I've been giving up worldly things like popularity. So you just kind of... I think the easiest route forward, and you're seeing several states do this now, is put in a ratchet feature on the revenue growth for the state. Historically, states have... The economy has grown in the United States historically, and the revenue growth has gone for more government spending. So now you're seeing several states, and we have this feature in ours, is once the revenues exceed 102% of last year's revenues, anything over that goes into tax cuts instead of spending. You have a couple of states now that have passed that ratchet feature. It's really hard to get state legislators to cut budgets. You can do it. It takes extraordinary circumstance, and you got a lot of people screaming. Regardless of how little the pain actually is, like I showed you on K-12, we're cutting the increase from 204 million to 177 million, and the wailing has been enormous. So I think that ratchet feature is the simple way. So you just get the revenue growth piled back into tax cuts, and that's the easy one to do. And then the second, I think you have to really try to stoke the place to get growth happening so that you capture it then through, and you need to make the shift from income taxes to consumption taxes. Part of our problem we have in the state of Kansas was I put forward a flat tax with a small business accelerator. That was the initial proposal. It had about a $90 million hole. Legislative process, and I had people in the legislature didn't want to see this pass. They thought, well, we'll fix his wagon. We'll just pass a rate cut and none of the elimination of deductions or exemptions or credits in the income tax system, which was all my pay-fors. And so they created $800 million revenue hole. And then they told me, oh, you need to veto this bill. And I said, well, are you going to pass something else? And they said, no. Well, would you? I said, well, I might. So they just were saying, we passed it, now you veto it. Because we created too big a hole. And I said, well, we'll try to figure it out. And I signed it. So that's really what you hear about in Kansas, was the design was far different than the implementation, but that happens in your legislative process. Legislatures, I've been in one for 16 years, everything moves differently. But if you can get something through, you better sign it, because you just don't know what you can get. I hope you can be smoother, and I really think the flat tax and then the ratchet and the small business accelerator are the key pieces of where you could do it with the least amount of pain involved. Well, I showed you that one chart of the registrations. Now, we haven't done a further analysis of that piece yet. But you can see this is new business filings at the Kansas Secretary of State's office. And you can see where it was kind of bumping along here at this level and then really started taking off. So we think this has been pretty successful. The anecdotal information is quite good. I run into people all the time that have moved a little something. Usually it's not big. 5 employees. A guy does a charter service out of Burlington, Colorado with a jet, and he moves it to Goodland, Kansas. It's 5 people that are working with it. But you're seeing it in a lot of different places, and particularly along Kansas, Missouri, and the Kansas City area, because you basically got one economic zone, and you can move 2 miles. And I went from, I don't know what the top rate in Missouri is, something over 6 or right at 6%. So you went from 6% to 0 and you move 2 miles and the same employee base, and so you're building. There's a lot of construction going on the Kansas side that I love. That's happening there in that area, and then we continue to put money heavily into schools and roads. So we ranked regularly in the top 5 in roads, and we've got a great public school system. I think we need to put a lot more performance parameters in our K-12 system, which we haven't historically. So we've spent this much growth, and our performance is flatlined pretty much. It's high, it's pretty good, but I'm going, if you're spending this much more, this number ought to be moving somewhere here if you're really getting results out of it. So we continue to invest heavily there and then cut other areas of government. I'm a big believer you do your core functions well, and other things you try to get out of. Privatize them, they're not an important feature, but get your core functions you need done well. We haven't done the numbers in our state on what it would have to, what we would have to move it to. So I don't know. I know I was talking to Rex last night. I think they've done the numbers here, and it depends a huge amount on whether or not you capture some of the pieces of the economy in your sales tax that aren't currently captured. So you'd have to do that. We will be looking at what those numbers are in the state of Kansas, but it's a two-piece question because you need what's the rate and then what's your taxable universe here, and I think it would require some combination of those to be able to move forward. State of Nebraska, when I did this tax plan, the governor at that time proposed eliminating the income tax there, and he was going to keep the sales tax at the same rate, but he's going to do away with all his exemptions in the sales tax, and it didn't get anywhere. Every one of those exemptions has a bunch of protectors. I've tried to do away with some in the sales tax. Very difficult politically to get done. Now maybe you could do it if you did the whole thing and you had a big sales promotion of it ahead of time, but they tried it. He didn't get anywhere with it. Well, you had one. Probably the classic case in America was Kansas City, Missouri school systems, where they taxed the state, what, $2 billion to put in the Kansas City, Missouri system 30 years ago, and it was a colossal failure. But what ours is, the court's been engaged in K-12 funding in the state of Kansas for 4 decades. They put a phrase in the Kansas Constitution 40 years ago that you'll provide adequate education. And the courts have interpreted that as we determine adequacy. And so 2 cases ago, they even set a number. Said you got to put this much in. This last case, which just came out this last year, they brought in what they called the Rose standards, which are a Kentucky set of standards. And they seem to be backing away from forcing an actual number, except on what's called equalization, which we have an equalization formula that if you're a student in one of the great suburb school districts in Johnson County, a student in the poorer area of southeastern Kansas needs to have equal access to the same quality of public education. So Johnson County pays for their own, and then the state subsidizes the school district in southeast Kansas to equalize to the Johnson County level. So they forced that, and that was the $130 million, and we're seeing if they're going to stand by this increased required number overall that they did 2 cases ago. I think it's unconstitutional. This is the court being the appropriator. The legislature, this is their primary authority, is to be the power of the purse. That's your primary power, and the court takes it. But when you get school finance cases, it's hard to appeal them up past the Kansas Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court normally doesn't take it. Unfortunately, we have the Missouri plan for our selection process of Supreme Court judges in Kansas. So, which is the Bar Association dominates the selection process. They send me 3 nominees, I get to pick one of them. If I don't pick one, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court picks the next person that goes on the court. This was the Missouri plan, and I wish you guys hadn't invented it. Prior to that, we had direct elections of Supreme Court judges, which about 1/3 of the states do. And you're better off there or the federal model, either one. In the state of Kansas, education policy is established by the State Board of Education, which is a separately elected body. They've embraced it. The State Board of Education has. The State Board of Education did. I have not. The legislature now is looking at bills to repeal the funding for implementation of Common Core. Which again is the power of the purse that the legislature has, and that's what's stewing in the legislative body now. I think we ought to have Kansas standards, not the national ones. I think we ought to have high standards, though. Here's what the genesis of what brought Common Core in the first place was too many places didn't have high standards, so our scores were pretty good, but you were testing by a low standard. And so I think we ought to raise the Kansas standards, and if our students don't perform so well, okay, let's measure and let's get the standards up, but let's have Kansas standards. We've had 80,000 people increase going on Medicaid since I've been in office. It's pretty substantial growth for us as a state. They call some of this a woodworking effect as you put so much emphasis and push on Medicaid. More people are pushed into the system, or they call for the exchanges and say, well, hey, you would qualify for Medicaid, why don't you get on Medicaid. We have not taken in the state of Kansas the expanded Medicaid under the ACA. And the reason we haven't is that we've got waiting lists for our current Medicaid services. So if you qualify for Medicaid now in Kansas, you get it, but you may not get the full bucket of services because we don't have the resources right now to do it, and the match rate's about a 60-40. We put up 40%, Fed puts up 60%. The expanded Medicaid, it's 100% federal for 3 years, then it goes to 90-10 match, where the state's only 10%. I honestly believe over the next decade, you're not going to see that 90-10 last, because the federal government is broke. They don't have any money, and what we have done when I was in Congress in the past is we've edged up the amount the states have to put in Medicaid. It's a real easy way to get money to the federal government and reduce your spend. And I think they're going to do that on the expanded Medicaid, given the federal government's financial precarious position that they're in. One of our biggest agencies is KDOT, Department of Transportation, like your MoDOT, and we brought a private sector guy in there, first time in decades. He's really good at it. I like what he looks at our... And donate his work. I can approach him for that, but I don't think he's willing to do that. But what I like about it is that when he was interviewing for the job, he went out and he looked at the hours that we had on our equipment. He said, you got equipment that you haven't put 50 hours in. Why do you have it? And I was going, thank you for asking that question. I mean, that's just because you want somebody that's thinking, how do you manage things? And what we're doing in the state of Kansas, a lot of it is just simply taking practices that are well established in the private sector, like managed care on your health care and a defined contribution system on your pension system, and migrating them to the public sector, because the private sector has had to do it to be able to manage some level of cost and still provide high quality service. So that's really a lot of what we're doing. The other thing we're doing is that we're competing as tax competitors. And I've been pitching people, we need to do a conference on tax competitors. Because that's something that we don't talk about that much in the country. We talk about tax consumption, but we don't talk about tax competition. And that's what really the states are in, is tax competition. And we need to encourage that every bit I can save in state government, still provide quality services, high education, good roads, I can pass on to my taxpayers, and I'm a better tax competitor. And that's the sort of discussion we need to get going, really, in the United States. The prior governor did something that I thought really bordered on what Obama does. She had expanded the special protection categories that are out there for race, color, creed, religion, that have been in statute for a number of years. She expanded them by executive order. It's just her signature, Governor Sebelius. And she expanded them just to state employees for homosexuals and transgender. And I said, two things. Number one, if you do this, this should be by statute. And number two, it should apply to everybody. So that's why I reissued the order, stated it for race, color, creed, religion, the basis that it's passed by statute for all Kansans. And I reissued and signed that and said to the legislature, if you want to do this, this should be passed by statute and it should apply to everybody, not just state employees. We've got a challenge this year. I went through that slide on the budget. We're going to fix it. And we'll fix it with the continued move from income taxes to consumption taxes. So I propose an expansion of cigarette taxes, alcohol taxes, and some eliminations of some of those deductions in the income tax code that I proposed in the first place. And that'll address it for this year. So I think most people, if they look at it, say, you did that big of an income tax cut, and you can fix it with some cigarette, alcohol taxes. Now we're cutting the mortgage deduction in half 2 years earlier than is currently in statute. That's a big one. But we're just moving it up 2 years from what it is presently. And the yelling about it is far greater than the pain that's here. The second is we got to grow. And we can stay on that old trend line. I mean, and Missouri has a trend line like this one too. You got one like this one. You've gone from, I don't know what your congressional representation, but it's gone down. I don't know if it's the same rate as ours, but it's gone down. And we've lost it to the South and West and pro-growth states, and I get so tired of people moving to Texas. I want to beat Texans. I don't want to lose to them, but I can sit there and whine about it or say you shouldn't do it, and it's your civic duty to stay in a higher tax state. And, there'll be a couple people who will do that. And most of them will go, really? Yeah, you think I ought to do that? Yes, I do. Well, it isn't happening. So the other thing, you ought to check the tax migration data, and I'm sure you guys have looked at this a lot. People migrate from high income tax states to lower income tax states, and we were particularly true of that. We were getting people, net immigration from California and Maryland, and losing people to Texas and Florida. You're probably exactly the same. Well, okay, then I'm going to get myself down on the income tax chart so I've got more places I can draw people in from. And we're getting tax migration. 2 years ago, we got first time in from Missouri, tax migrators, because we were pretty much at your same income tax level. People will move off of the income tax. But we're just trying to change this thing, and we could only get what we got, and you take what you can get in the legislating process, I think. Our unemployment rate in these counties is like 2.5%, 3%, complete full employment. Now, the problem is the wage scale is generally lower than in your cities, and our biggest problem now in much of this whole area of western Kansas, nobody's built a house in the last 50 years. All your housing stock is old, and so you're trying to move somebody back, and they're saying, okay, I got a job, I'll move into this area, and generally the wife, not always, is saying, I'm not moving into that. And your wage scale is such you can't afford new construction. So we're really having a challenge about how can we build smaller houses? So like 1,500 square feet places, can you build a group of them so you go to, you get your cost structure where the rental rate can support it? The other thing that we've seen happen out here, and I love it, is this is a perfect place to do animal agriculture. It's a perfect place to fatten cattle, do dairy, hogs. It's big, wide open area. It's easily accessible. It's sparsely populated. And there's a lot of money in that. So we're the fastest growing dairy state in America now. Kansas is. We're the second or third most cattle on feed in this area. Those create lots of jobs. A dairy, you milk those cows 3 times a day, every day of the year, and it takes 50 guys, and these are 1,000 to 5,000 head dairy operations now. And now we've got the Chinese building a big dairy processing plant in this area to dry the milk and ship it to Asia because they don't trust their own milk. The food supply in China, the Chinese don't want to eat their own food because it's not good. So we're going, good, we got a great idea for this. And so the second largest dairy in China is building, they're a key investor on this big dairy processing plant. DFA, Dairy Farmers of America, is the lead on it. But that's, you get them back by jobs and economic activity. But there's things, and with the internet now, you can live a lot of places and do work. Our problem really is housing now. Well, I did an allotment, and so we'll have we'll come out with somewhere around $70 million ending balance to the positive. I did a 2%.
So you run a surplus this year?
Oh, you have to by statute, by Constitution, of the state of Kansas. You have to run that, and we'll get it done, and it'll be more than that. I can't emphasize enough, though, the need on your pension reform. Pension's what got Detroit. It's getting cities in California. The states aren't far behind. So all new hires in the state of Kansas, they're going into a defined contribution system as of this year. It's the first year of it. So it's kind of a hybrid cash balance. They put their money and we put in ours, and then when they retire, we buy an annuity with that lug. But I've got a $9 billion prior sins hole that one is hard because we've got to deal with it now, or you're building such a huge problem for yourself in the future. And most states are. We went from second least funded to middle of the rank of states when we went from 56% funded pension system to a 60% funded pension system. You know, most people are thinking you need to be 80% funded in these things, and we moved up nearly the middle of the pack of the states, getting to 60. This is now places are saying you ought to just do radical changes on it, and I don't know what people can accomplish, but this thing is a big one. I really want to appreciate you. One of the people I've admired that came into Kansas, spent much of her life here in the St. Louis area, St. Philippine Duchesne, St. Charles, Missouri. French lady comes in here. Her and two other sisters had a pact with each other to go help the Native Americans in the United States. So she was here at age 70. She comes over to Lynn County, Kansas, to a place about 2 miles from where we used to farm. And she helps the Potawatomis that had been walked over from Indiana on the Trail of Death. And she was there, imagine 70 years old in 1840. She takes the paddle boat up and a buckboard down from Westport to this area in Lynn County, Kansas, where I'm from. Takes care of Native Americans. She's 70 years old, can't do anything because she's just too old and decrepit. So she prays all the time. And I had a print up of her in my office of her praying. And the natives would go in there at night into her little hut and look at her and just see her praying there. And then they'd put leaves and twigs on her habit to see if she moved during the night, and they'd get back up the next morning. And the leaves and twigs are still there. And so they gave her a big, long Potawatomi name that meant lady who prays all the time. She came back after only a year there to St. Charles, felt like an abject failure, but she had done what she and the other 2 sisters had the pact to do. Founds all these schools and everything. Is one of the 4 canonized people from North America. And it's just a beautiful story of love and caring. And the natives loved her. She didn't do anything, but she prayed all the time. And they just loved it, that she was praying for them all the time. And that was near my home area, and that I have with you. God bless y'all. Appreciate you.